Hey, Rising, welcome to another round of Groves as we continue our series in Revelation. I was told last week by my Grove that I slouch too much in these videos, so I'm going to try to sit upright. So hopefully that looks better. But, as we continue in kind of our second round, our second time through Revelation in Groves, I just want to remind you again that we're not going to be able to cover every single thing and every single question and every single detail. That's kind of not the goal of the series. It's really to get more of an overview and kind of get to the stuff that we can know, and kind of maybe, some of the stuff we just have to, again, shrug our shoulders and say, well, we don't know. God's ways are higher than ours, so we don't necessarily know what everything represents. But the things that we do, we want to kind of drill down on and kind of really discuss and talk through these things. And so today we're going to be talking about Revelation 2 through 3, which, if you remember, I think it was the second week of our series on Sunday mornings, was all about what we call the church age. Where Jesus really addresses these 7 different churches that were 7 churches during the first century in the area of Asia Minor and modern day Turkey, but also represent possibly 7 periods during the church age between when Jesus came the first time as the Lamb of God and when he'll return again the second time as the Lion of Judah. And so this church age that we talked about, where Jesus is in the midst of us, he's walking with us through it. But these could be 7 periods of the church age, or it could be 7 representative churches or 7 representative types of individuals. But really the whole question is, well, what is he trying to tell us, and what is he trying to share with us? And so on Sunday morning, we had talked about the first church and the last church. We talked about the church in Ephesus. We talked about the church in Laodicea and kind of their strengths and their weaknesses and how God addresses them. And we talked about this pattern that we saw in each, as he addresses each of these churches. And the first thing he kind of says is, these are the words of, and then he kind of uses one of the images from earlier in chapter 1 of who Jesus is, to remind us and remind the readers that this is not John's word. These are the words of Jesus coming directly to us. And then one of the other things he says is, I know your deeds. I know what's going on. I see everything. There's nothing that's hidden from my sight. And so I want you to know that I know the good, the bad, and the ugly. And then he would commend them for something, like, here's something, good job that you're doing well in. And then he would command them in a sense and saying, here's something you need to work on. Here's an area you need to work on. And then he would say something to the effect of, to him who has ears to hear, let him hear. And if you remember, that was this idea that, well, what are we going to do with what we're hearing here? Are we going to listen and take to heart, or are we going to just kind of like blow it off and kind of ignore it? And then he would say, to the one who is victorious, to the one who prevails, who Nikeo, that's the word, we get our brand name Nike, who is victorious, who prevails, who wins. In that sense, then he tells us something of good that's going to happen. And so we talked about this whole church age idea, and I think we talked even on the week 1 a little about the temple and kind of God's position with us, and I think that's going to relate to what I want to talk about today, because I want to talk a little bit about one of the churches we're going to talk about that we haven't talked about yet, and you're going to discuss some of the other ones. But if you look at the 7 churches, and if these are 7 representative individuals or 7 representative churches, then there's one that kind of stands out as, this is the one you probably want to be. The other one is like, this is what's not so great, and here's what is good. But this one is like, it's all thumbs up, where Jesus is like, hey, I got nothing bad to say. Just like Laodicea is like, I had nothing good to say. But in this church, he's like, you guys are doing all right. And I would hope that would be our desire, is to be the church and to be the people and individuals that God's like, yeah, you're holding out and you're doing good. And he's going to say something to them in the end that I kind of want to preface before we get there, because he's going to talk about pillars of faith and kind of strength and their might, and they stand strong, right? And it's very important for us to understand this, because this idea, we talk about temples, and scattered throughout Asia Minor at the time in the first century, there was all kinds of temples. So temples were just normal. It'd be like seeing churches around the neighborhood today. In fact, when we go to Israel, and God willing, we'll be able to go back and you'll be able to join us, we go to a place called Caesarea Philippi. And this was kind of in northern Israel, if you will, kind of the Golan area up near Syria. And it was known because this was a place of polytheism. It was known for a place where you could literally go and you could worship any god, and it was like literally like temple row. Like, here's a temple to Zeus, and here's a temple to Pan, and here's a temple to Baal, and here's a temple to so-and-so and so-and-so. And if you go there today, you can actually see these little niches in the rocks where they would put the idols in these temples, and you could basically go, and I want to worship this god here, and I got to worship this god over here. I got to bring my honor this god over here. And this is actually the place where Jesus asked his disciples, well, who do people say that I am? It's like, am I just another option out of the smorgasbord of options to pick from when it comes to deities, or am I different? And so it's important for us to realize that, because that's not just something that was happening in Caesarea Philippi. That was happening all over the Roman Empire, where there were just temples to all these different gods, and you would go and you would honor that God or that deity. And there was also, we talked about this before, there was also a lot of worship of the emperor. We talked about a couple of them were kind of megalomaniacs and wanted to be worshipped as gods while they were still living. And so we talked a little bit about them. Nero, you've heard of him. Domitian, these were some of the really not so great guys that really persecuted the Christians a great deal because they wouldn't worship them as God. But in this region, where one of the churches we're going to talk about today was there was a strong kind of cult following of the emperor, where we worship the emperor, we worship all these other gods. We got the Greek gods, we got the Roman gods, and so there was these temples. And if you've seen pictures of ancient temples, or you've seen, what you've seen in Greece or Rome, and you've seen these pillars, right? The Corinthian columns and the Ionian and Doric and all those ones we memorized when we were in high school, all those different kind of columns, right? And they would hold up the temple. And so what would happen is this area is also prone to earthquakes. And I don't know if you've ever been in an earthquake. Again, I talk about wildfires and earthquakes, and those aren't really familiar things here in Georgia. We don't really experience a whole lot of those. But growing up in California, we had them both. And so kind of got to experience, when everything starts to shake. In fact, I remember being in high school and being in chorus class one day, and we had one of these earthquakes, and it was like, hide under the table, because that's the best we can do, and pray to God that you survive this thing as you watch everything kind of start to shift, right? Well, if you can imagine back in the day, first century, they didn't have the same building codes that we do today, and they didn't have all that engineering. They had a lot of great engineering, but not when it came to earthquakes, when you're building out of stone. And so when you had these earthquakes, things would shake and things would rattle. And if you can imagine these columns in these temples, they would fall and they would be destroyed. In fact, in the area, I'll just go ahead and tell you which one we're going to talk about, is Philadelphia. In the area of Philadelphia, they had all these temples, and about 50 years before Revelation was written, they had a massive earthquake that leveled the place. We're talking every single one of these temples came crashing down, and they had to appeal to the Caesar for help and aid to kind of rebuild, so they could, hey, give us some money so we can rebuild your temple and honor you and praise you, O mighty King of Kings and Lord of Lords, Caesar. And so they had to rebuild. And so kind of take all that into consideration. You had to go to the temple to worship your God. That's where you went. And then when Yahweh came, he's like, no, there's one, you can worship me in the temple in Jerusalem, and that's where we can encounter me and meet me. And if you remember when we did the whole church age thing, it's like, that's not true anymore. We don't have to go to Jerusalem. We don't have to go to a physical man-made temple in order to worship the one true God. We can worship him in spirit and truth. We can worship him wherever we are. We can worship him on a Sunday morning. We can worship in our car, because he is with us. He is with us everywhere we go through the church age, and so we don't have to go to a temple. But listen to what he says to the church in Philadelphia. A few things. We're not going to read the whole thing. But he says, at one point, I love what he says in chapter 3, verse 10. He says, since you have kept my command to endure patiently, our word hupomeno, if you have kept, if you've guarded, if you've maintained and preserved, and you've watched over all these things that I've told you to do, and you've endured patiently, I will also keep you. He says, I will preserve you, same word. I will watch over and guard and preserve and maintain you from the hour of trial that is going to come on the whole world to test the inhabitants of the earth. I'll keep you. I'll hold you tight. I'll preserve you and maintain you through the difficulty. Some people would say that means he's going to take us out of the trouble, but there's no guarantee on that. And this is what he says. I am coming soon. Hold on to what you have so that no one will take your crown. Let nobody take it away from you. Hold on firmly. Grasp it. Be strong. Be courageous. Keep going. Don't give up. The one who is victorious, who prevails, who overcomes, who doesn't quit, I will make a pillar in the temple of my God, and never again will they leave it. I will write on them my name, the name of my God, and the name of the city of my God, the new Jerusalem, which is coming down out of heaven from my God. And I will also write on them my new name. Whoever has ears to hear, let them hear what the Spirit says to the churches. And I just love this idea because like if you will hold on, if you will prevail, if you will just keep going, know that I am with you and I will maintain you and I'll preserve you. In fact, you know what you get to look ahead to is that you will be this pillar in God's temple. If you fast forward to the end, we did this in the very first week, and you fast forward to the end of Revelation, and you kind of see that when we're in heaven, in the new Jerusalem that's come out of heaven from God, there is no temple. And it says the reason there's no temple is because God dwells with us. There's no need for us to go somewhere to physically meet with him. It's like he's present with us. And we should have that confidence and we can have that assurance that God is with us through it all. And he's saying, hold on, keep going, keep my commands, keep my command to keep going and to persevere and to bear up under the load and to push through the trial and tribulation because your eyes are fixed on me. And because of that, you will be this pillar in this future temple in that sense, because you will be with God in the New Jerusalem. My name will be written on you because you are mine and I am yours. And so this is this kind of stuff that can keep us going through the ups and downs and trials, that we have God with us through the storm. In fact, I think I mentioned this before, when we go to Jerusalem and when we go to the Western Wall, you see the Orthodox Jews there praying, and I kind of ask our guide, well, what are they praying for? And they're praying for the Messiah to come and to rebuild the temple. In fact, if you go to Jerusalem today, you can actually meet people and see this whole organization that's trying to build the third temple, because they're like, God, where's God now? He's not with us. We need a temple so that we can worship him there. And you're kind of like, but he's already with us. God is with us. That's what Jesus did. And that's why I think in 70 AD, he took out the temple so that they wouldn't be like contingent on that. And he's saying, I am now with you. And so it's this key thing that we have to realize. It's this beautiful thing where he's like, hey, I'm going to make you a pillar. And I don't know about you, but I look forward to being a pillar in God's temple in that sense, and being with him in the New Jerusalem, in the new heaven and earth where there is no temple. But I think he's calling us to be pillars of strength today. And even when the world is shaking and everything else collapses, all of these temples from all these other gods, they just come crashing down like they did before Revelation was written throughout Turkey. He's like, no, we can be pillars and we can stand strong and we can hold on and we can stand firm and we can make it through. So just some thoughts for you as we kick things off today, as you're going to be unpacking each of the different, not each, but the ones that we haven't talked about, these churches during the church age, praying that we can be like the church in Philadelphia and we can hold on and we can be strong and we can be pillars. So hopefully that will get you guys going. I hope you guys have a great week, and we will check back in next time.